Rose, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good evening, good evening.
Good evening.
Rose, I appreciate you quoting me back to me. That's awesome. First order of business, ladies and gentlemen, if you will, please. Now, I wish I could see the look on your faces. I can see the look on Rose's face. Um, what would you do if I decided to light up this cigar or if I lit up a cigarette? Would that be a first impression for some of you who don't know me? And what would that first impression be? What would you think? Somebody comes onto a Zoom meeting, and the first thing they do is they light a cigarette or they light a cigar. And for those of you who may know me, what would this do to my perceived image or my brand? Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we are here to talk about exactly that. The twist, however, is going to be how emotional intelligence can actually help or hinder your brand, your image, and in fact, generally help or deter from any influence that you may or may not have. Now, I am going to try and bring up some slides over here, and I'm going to switch between the slides, which I hope everybody can see. And I'll also occasionally be over here to point at these slides. So if you can see the slides nice and clear, please put a Y or a yes in the chat box, just to make sure that we're on the same track. If you can see them, if you can clearly read them, just put a Y or a yes in the chat. Fantastic. I can see the Y's coming in, the yeses coming in. Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. All right, let's get this show on the road. So let me blow this up. What do you think this gentleman does for a living? And I use that term loosely, if you will. Gentlemen, what do you think he does for a living? And again, you can put that in the chat. I'm going to try and be very engaging with all of you. What does he do for a living? If you could sort of describe him in one word. Okay. All right. Somebody says murder. Thank you, Paul. He's a murderer. All right. He's a thug. He's a rapper. I can see them coming in. Stealer, gangster, drug dealer. Yes, even the R word. Sure, bad boy. Of course. Okay. Now, if I showed you this image, would you think differently? Because this is the same gentleman simply presenting himself differently. And it actually says there that he's a graduate of a major university, Harvard, no doubt. Now, does that change that initial impression that you had of him when I first showed that picture? How about this lady over here? What do you think she does for a living? How would you describe her? If you could describe her in one word, what do you think her main occupation is? Okay, nail tech, trainer, teacher. I can see them coming in. Thank you. Teacher, 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 artist, makeup artist. Yeah, for sure. She looks like she does have the tools of the trade. Nail tech. Now, again, if I was to switch that over and show that, would that change that first impression that you had of her? And again, she's graduated from an Ivy League university, and there she is presenting herself maybe slightly differently. And in showing those images, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted you to kind of look at your own biases, look at how you've been influenced by the media, look at how you've been influenced by literally what you saw these people wearing, because that was the description that most of you gave. So I'm going to talk about my favorite sandwich, which is the BLT. Okay. So there's your BLT sandwich. That is a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, or tomato, depending on what part of the world you come from, a BLT. Now, I'm going to extract the first letter for each of those ingredients, the B, the L, and the T, because that's really what I want us to focus on. And for me, and I think for everybody who's part of this conversation, what we're looking to do is really highlight the B, the L, and the T. And the BLT really stands for what I think is believability, trustworthiness, and likability. Now, we can talk about different ways to engender believability, trustworthiness, likability. There are so many experts around the world who have talked about how this. I am going to approach this from the point of view of my area of interest, particularly when it comes to image and influence. So for me, believability, just like I showed you in those first few pictures, comes about through what we wear and body language. What we wear and body language. Trustworthiness, maybe through eye contact, maybe through voice, and likability comes through authenticity and warmth, among other things. So that is the track that I'm going to take as far as linking image, influence, and emotional intelligence. So I've already tipped my hat, given the game away, if you will. But by the numbers, if you were to look at these numbers here, and I hope you can see them clearly. So the 55, the 38, and the 7. Okay? Now, what do you think those numbers stand for? And some of you may already know this. You're familiar with those percentages or with those numbers. But what do you think those numbers stand for? 55, 38, 7. Obviously related to what this conversation is about. So let's start with the 55. Let's just do the 55. What do you think the 55 is? The 55%. Again, okay, action. Morris, thank you. I'm looking at the chat over here. I can see anybody else. We have image from Mercy. Thank you. Believability from Mildred. Yes, stands to reason. After all, isn't this what I first mentioned? Sure. Okay. Maybe a couple more. Our actions, purity. Thank you for that. Yeah, in fact, I think you're all on the right sort of track. Action, Hillary. Thank you for that. I'm going to be even more specific. I think for me, the 55 is specifically body language and dress. Now, when I talk about dress, obviously I'm talking about the clothes that you wear, whether it's the style, whether it's the colors, whether it's the combination of colors. It could be texture, it could be fit, it could be fabric, it could be all of these things. And when I speak about body language, I include things like micro gestures, I include things like obviously body language, hand gestures. So I want you to look at this sort of in totality in terms of the 55%, which I had earlier linked to believability. So what you see, assuming that you're not visually impaired, 55%, and shall we say that is 55% of perhaps your communication, maybe 55% of how you're perceived as a professional, or 55%, as Rosa said, how you're seen, heard, and remembered. The 38 is actually going to be voice. Now, again, these are numbers that I've extrapolated from studies that have been done, research that has been done. We can have an intellectual conversation depending on the type of work that you're doing, whether truly 38% of your voice counts towards your image and your influence. But let's take these numbers at the face value as I am presenting them to you. 38% is going to be your voice. And we're going to go through all of these and pass them out in detail, particularly as I link them to emotional intelligence. And then the 7% is what you say. Now, that's not to say that what you say is completely irrelevant. I mean, you can look the part, you can dress the part, you can sound the part, but if you open your mouth, and let me just speak a little Kiswahili here, ukifungua mdomo na sumu inatoka, people will be like, what? That's it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what your voice looks like if you have no idea about, say, the sales figures, or you have no idea about the industry that you're in. Let's assume that you do know, you're presenting this information, or you're meeting a customer, or you're talking to your team, or you're leading a group of peers. these numbers become even more stark. People will judge you. And again, there's the first impression, but there's also that reinforcing message of your impression. Just like I did first off with the cigar that I was lighting. Was I sending a mixed message for those of you who know me, or was that a first impression for those of you who'd never met me? This guy's actually lighting a cigar or a cigarette in a meeting. So for me, it's actually looking at two sides of a coin. This is how we're going to approach this. There is the visual part that we see, or the external part, I should say, not the visual part, but the external part that we see. But there's also what is inside. So I'm going to talk about the exterior, and I'm going to talk about also your image and the influence that comes from within using those three areas that we looked at. So it comes as maybe no surprise to some of you. Let me make this bigger. That I love the movies, and I particularly love the superhero genre. I love it. I've loved this ever since I was a young lad, and today I still make sure that I am front row. I still make sure I'm front row at the next iteration of the Marvel comic universe. We can have a side discussion about the latest one that has come out, the Thunderbolts. Okay. However, this superpower that I have enjoyed for years. When I was young, I wanted to be invisible. That's a superpower I wanted to have. I wanted to be invisible for a number of reasons. I wanted to be invisible to hide in class, to listen to my parents when they're having a conversation, they chase me out of the room, or even to listen to other conversations that were being had. Now, fast forward today, I think my superpower is actually being seen for the right reasons. I am very conscious and intentional about curating everything about how I'm seen, from what I'm wearing, combination of colors, to my background over here. Everything is intentional to lead you down a certain path. And ideally, to show you that perhaps influence and image is part of what my brand speaks for. That is what I want to convey, particularly in a meeting like this, where I'm having a conversation with all of you who have signed up. I want you to be able to do something. There's going to be a call to action at the end of this presentation, at the end of this conversation. I want to influence you. I want to have that conversation that I've had several times over the years, where somebody meets me after 2 years or 3 years or 2 months or 3 months, and they say, you changed the way I did XYZ. That is influence. And everything starts with being intentional in terms of how you present yourself. There's a fantastic book called Influence by Professor Robert Cialdini. Let me just make this a little bit bigger, so those of you might want to take a screenshot. It's called The Psychology of Persuasion from Professor Cialdini. This is a fantastic book for those of you who are looking to increase your communication skills. Now, if you were to look at the cells in the human body, how many cells do you think there are in the human body? How many cells are there in the human body? Anyone want to venture a guess? Again, you can just throw that in the chat. How many cells do you think there are in the human body? Okay, billions. Thank you, Wanjiro. Billions of cells. Yeah, possibly. Billions, trillions. Thank you, Christine. I mean, I don't think the number has been quantified, but this much is true. Each of these cells, if you were to drill down to their molecular level, you will actually find that each of these cells is moving, just like in this caption. They're moving. And when things move, they create some sort of energy. That stands to reason, right? This energy, however, is largely given off and can be perceived by other people based on their mood, on their feelings, and their emotions. And I'm using those words interchangeably, based on their mood, their feelings, and their emotions. So, there is a quote here from Dr. Candice Peart. As our feelings change, this mixture of peptides travels through our body and our brain, and they're literally changing the chemistry of every cell in your body. In fact, she wrote a seminal book called The Molecules of Emotion, Why You Feel the Way You Feel. So I am reiterating the point that your emotions are largely responsible for the energy that you give off. Let me repeat that again. Your emotions, your feelings, your moods are largely responsible for the energy that you give off. And we know that. You can walk into a room and there's somebody who gives off negative energy, and people say to God Nanda, nobody wants to be in the same room as that person versus the person who walks into a room and the room lights up. So, these emotions that we feel, these feelings, these moods, and again, I'm talking about this without sort of giving a definition of emotional intelligence, but I want you to sort of tap into the emotions, the moods, and the feelings of how you're feeling. Actually, if you are able to understand them, to manage them, to perceive them, you are well on your way to starting to control your image and your influence. Are you seeing the connection there? In fact, there are a lot of people, I think, who are part of this call who are what we call Genos emotional intelligence coaches. Now, we have a model that we use as a Genos emotional intelligence coach. Now, I don't want you to necessarily read everything about this particular model because I'm going to highlight just three that we're going to focus on today: self-awareness, awareness of others, and self-management. So self-awareness is literally recognizing your emotions. Let me go back here. And recognizing maybe strengths and weaknesses that you have and how they influence whatever decisions you make, your behavior, your patterns of behavior, and ultimately your performance. Your body is your subconscious mind. That is a quote from that book called The Molecules of Emotion. Self-awareness, recognizing your emotions and recognizing, therefore, your strengths and your weaknesses. So, understanding these strengths and weaknesses helps you to strategically manage the image that you are presenting to the world out there. You can actually create certain perceptions. Just as I've said, I have created a certain perception, hopefully, through all of this and all of that back there, so that I lead you in a particular direction for you to think of me in a certain way. Understanding what is going on in terms of your emotions can also help you strategically manage your image. How, do you ask? Well, let's look at, I think, the the lowest hanging fruit on that tree, which is dressing. Again, you made the case based on what somebody was wearing and what they portrayed, whether that person was a thug or a nail tech. So dressing can put you in any bucket that you wish. For example, dressing powerfully shows leadership. Dressing in blue, ergo, trust. Dressing in red, power. Subtly mixing patterns, creativity. Okay? If I was to say wear something brown, maybe more approachable. something less dark, if I was to combine pastel colors, maybe somebody who's in the service or the healthcare industry. So these are simple ways that you can create an image for your target market to see. And part of this is understanding these strengths and weaknesses, which comes from that emotional intelligence trait of self-awareness. So how else can this present itself? If I feel a particular way, in fact, I'll be honest with you, today there were perhaps a few, I'll use the word challenges that I had today in terms of things going on in my personal life. But I realized that dressing this way for this audience, meaning you guys, and recognizing the fact that perhaps I'm not feeling at my most powerful, perhaps I'm not feeling at my most articulate, perhaps I'm not feeling at my most creative. However, putting on these particular clothes and wearing this and knowing that these clothes are going to literally affect my behavior and my decisions and strength has actually helped me in terms of my performance today. And so, to me, self awareness is the first of all, I think anybody who practices emotional intelligence knows that self awareness is the key and the gateway to managing and perceiving and being better or emotionally intelligent. All right, so I think I have some pictures here. I won't go through them. Oh, here we go. So here we go. We've got a picture of somebody who's dressed more creatively. We've got pictures here of somebody who's dressed perhaps a little bit more approachable, not as stark. I think I have another picture here of somebody who's dressed again a little bit more approachable. And so you can actually use this information, tap into your feelings, tap into your emotions, gather that information, and then you can present yourself in a way that helps you and helps others as well. And what about body language, for example? So, what can we say about body language? Well, again, if you're able to recognize that you are feeling, shall we say, certain strong emotions. So maybe you're feeling anxious, you're feeling irritated, maybe even anger. Well, that generally tends to manifest itself in terms of your body language. And it might manifest itself in terms of perhaps the way you sit or stand or present yourself, any number of ways, depending on the situation that you're in. But again, realizing that you are feeling that particular emotion can help you then adjust the manifestation of that feeling in terms of your body language and consciously manage whether it's your facial expressions. So somebody says something to you that is annoying and you're in an interview, for example, something that is high stakes or a board meeting or something along those things. Instead of wearing your heart on your sleeve and showing that you're upset, you can actually recognize the fact that you are irritated, that you're angry, that you are feeling exasperated by that particular remark, and then control your facial features to present something else that is going to help you. And also recognizing your body. In fact, your body is telling you a lot about your particular mood and emotion. Take an audit of your body language right now. It's 6 o'clock in the evening here in Nairobi. Maybe it's been a long day. Maybe it's been a hard day. Look at your body language right now. Is it telling you something about your mood and emotion? So that's another way that you can use it as a barometer. And then again, because you're recognizing either a strength or a weakness, you can then adjust that to suit whatever the event or the occasion might be. Okay, I'm going to take a pause there. And just to make sure that you can still hear me, that you can see my presentation, and that we're together, and you still want me to go on, just put a Y or a yes in the chat. Thank you. I can see the yeses coming in. Wonderful. All right. So I have another quote that I love. Now, this is not my quote, but I love this. The only reason to get up and speak is to change the world. Or the only reason to speak is to change the world. So again, going back to your self-awareness, how can that be used in terms of your tone of voice. And remember, your tone of voice is 38%. So I hope you see how I'm threading the needle. Well, you can regulate your tone. Again, it stands to reason that if you are feeling a strong emotion, that is liable to show or likely to show in terms of your tone of voice. And you can regulate that or change that depending on that mood or emotion. Or on the other end, conveying empathy, positivity, confidence. In fact, how you use your voice can actually change the way that you feel. So I hope you're beginning to see how, particularly, this trait of self awareness can help you in terms of managing your image and the perception that you are showing to the outside world. Now, let me ask another question. And I realize I'm engaging you quite a bit, but this was deliberate. Which do you think comes first, passion or skill? Which comes first, passion or skill? Passion or skill? Passion, 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 passions. Well, I may have some surprising news for you. There's another fantastic book called So Good They Cannot Ignore You. And this is from another professor, Cal Newport of Stanford University. Why skills trump passion in the quest for work and you love? And Cal Newport makes the case that actually, if you are able to tap into a skill that you have, it could be an innate skill, it could be a skill that you have practiced, and you are able to tap into that and use it, you can actually turn that into a passion. And he makes the case that for a lot of people, maybe not for everyone, but for a lot of people, their misplaced passion actually leads them to do something that they are not successful in. So remember, we talked about understanding your strengths and weaknesses helps you identify, understanding your strengths and weaknesses is a trait of self-awareness. So if you are able to identify those particular skills that you are good at, and again, a lot of this can come through um, perhaps how certain things make you feel when you have accomplished them, certain tasks. If you're able to identify these, and he calls them authentic skills, these are authentic skills. Now, notice this is different from something that you are passionate about, but authentic is skills that you are good at, skills that you can double down, that you can either monetize, or that there is some value that you can get out of because you are better than everybody else at doing it. Well, guess what? That actually becomes something that you should be able to tap into. So rather than just go for the things that you are passionate about, why don't you start looking at the things that you are good at, the things that come easy to you, the ones that you are able to do better than anybody else, the ones that come easy to you. And that emotional intelligence strength of self-awareness is being able to recognize that particular skill. And then for a lot of people, this actually becomes something that they can monetize. And then the passion follows. All right. I'm just going to keep going because I have one eye on the clock. Now, the second emotional intelligence trait was awareness of others. So this is noticing, acknowledging others, maybe ensuring they feel value, or even adjusting your style to best fit with other people. Now, again, these are the definitions that we use as generous emotional intelligence coaches. This awareness of other people, noticing them, acknowledging them. And if I was to ask you which is more valuable, gold or platinum? Gold or platinum? Which is more valuable, gold or platinum? Which would you say is the more value of these two? Gold or platinum? Platinum, gold, gold, platinum, gold, gold, a lot of golds, gold. Yeah, stands to reason that gold is more valuable. And you've heard of the golden rule, right? Treat other people as you would like to be treated. Well, there is the platinum rule. So, in my mind, the platinum rule actually supersedes the golden rule. So, platinum is more valuable than gold. And the platinum rule is treat other people as they would like to be treated. Treat other people as they would like to be treated. Now, this directly taps into the EI trait of being aware of other people and adjusting your style to fit it. So, for example, as a speaker or a trainer or a coach, part of my job is not just to talk, but also to look at the reaction that my talk is having on my audience and then adjust that style so that they feel either comfortable or more receptive to my particular message. Um, if we were to go back to part of the 55%, which is dressing. So this stands to reason. You would choose to dress, depending on the audience, based on their culture, based on the occasion, maybe even the expectation of what they want. Now, you have to balance this with, again, your self-awareness of knowing that I need to dress in a way that conveys people, that gives a perception that maybe I'm a leader or I'm the best in my field or whatever that case might be. But if I've been in this situation, maybe I'm giving a talk, mashinani, ukondani, am I going to dress like this? No, most likely not. I'm probably going to dress in a way that's a little bit more in touch with the environment, my surroundings, and maybe even the audience that I'm going to speak to. In fact, I have tapped into that quite a bit so that you present something that makes people feel that they're being treated as they would like to be treated. So, again, put these into context. How does your audience feel about you and when I say your audience, I'm talking about your target market. When you walk into that meeting, when you are doing a pitch, when you are presenting some information for them, when you are looking for donor funding, whatever the case might be. And do you then portray that image that makes those people feel comfortable? Okay. How about body language? Well, here's one easy way that you can use body language to, again, treat others as they would like to be treated, this awareness of other people. And that is simply mimicking. In fact, mimicking is such a powerful, powerful gesture that is used throughout the animal kingdom, not just in human beings. And the way it presents itself is very simple. If you're in a meeting and you're talking to somebody and you'd like to create more rapport or empathy with that particular person, slowly mimic their body language. Now, again, you obviously have to use you you obviously have to use your best judgment. If they are standing on their head and drinking a glass of water, maybe that's not the kind of body language that you'd like to mimic. Why they would be doing that, I don't know. But if they, for example, maybe put one arm on their chin, or they're slowly scratching their head, or they're leaning forward, again, these are things that can help you create rapport in such an immense way with your target market. If you're both walking to the lift, for example, or you're walking to the car park, or you're walking to the stage to get your matatus with, again, somebody who's your target market, matching their pace, stride for stride. Again, you're not doing this in terms of mocking them, but you're doing this in terms of them actually feeling like you empathize with them. You are aware of them. It's very powerful. Aha. So let me play something here real quick. So, you want to stop. I apologize for been acting lately. Actually, feel that guy. You know, these things are
in an investigation, no one is off limits. To be honest, I didn't want to think you were capable of murdering someone. You know me better than anybody else.
Okay. Were you able to hear that exchange? I hope you did hear that exchange. Were you able to hear that exchange? Just put a yes if you heard that exchange. Rose, did you hear that? Yes, thank you. Not at all, not clearly. Okay.
No, not,
All right.
not very clear.
It wasn't very clear. Okay, I'll make sure I put my mic closer to it next time. All right. So this is actually a scene from one of my extracurricular activities. Now, if you could hear our voices, so I'm playing a certain character, the other person is playing a certain character, and we're both sort of trying to question the motives of something that has happened. And if you could hear our voices, and again, I apologize if you couldn't hear that very clearly, is that our tones were perfectly synchronized. In fact, that scene goes on for a whole 5 minutes. So that tone, his tone matched my tone matched his tone. And we started playing a little game of tennis in terms of how we were using our tonality. Now, how can you bring that to the professional world, if you will? Well, it's pretty simple. Adjusting your tone, maybe how you pace your words, and in fact, even the language that you use to again match your target market. This is very powerful. Listen to the words that are coming out of the person that you're either sitting across or listening to. You can then begin to literally mimic that type of language or use that type of those type of idioms or whatever it is that the person might be speaking. And again, you can adjust your tone and your pace. This is something that's so powerful that you can do in order to be able to, again, create the image that you are empathetic. You definitely have that trait of the awareness of other people. Now, internally, how you could do this is just being attuned to other people's emotions. And how do you tune to people's emotions? Well, again, you watch their body language, you listen to their tone of voice, and then you're able to sort of connect with that, and that makes you feel hopefully more authentic and more valued. A lot of times it is about us, what we want, and maybe our feelings and our emotions, and less about the other person's. But being attuned to the other person's can definitely help you in terms of making you feel connected and authentic and valued, as I've illustrated there. Okay, let me see if this can be heard. Okay, I saw a message there saying can't hear any voice. So it was actually no sounds really. I just wanted you to look at that. Now, that's fine if you didn't get it. There were really no words that were spoken. It was more capturing the image of the scene. Now, this is from a movie called Ratatouille. And this movie is about a rat that actually cooks in a high-end French restaurant. Now, what I showed you was a food critic who came into the restaurant. He had a bite of that food. He has no idea that the rat has cooked his food, but it immediately transported him to when he was a young boy and he had been bullied from school and he came home and his mother made him that dish. That dish is actually called ratatouille. So in other words, there was a direct connection between the food that he tasted and how he felt. So the case I'm trying to make here is that you need to be either like the dish or the person who prepared that dish. And we live in an emotional economy. And being able to connect with your target market or your target audience is vital for you to succeed, particularly in this world of AI and other things that are going on. So I'm buttressing the case for being attuned to the emotions of other people to make you feel more connected, authentic, and valued. I hope that didn't get too much lost in translation. All right. Moving on, self-management. This is the last one. Regulating emotions in a constructive way. Self-management, yeah, regulating your highs and your lows. We go through those swings on a daily basis. We are here one time in the day and then we are all the way low, but being able to regulate them in a way that is going to help you. And that is what I use the word constructive. So, how can you do that? Well, how about presenting your external image in a way that aligns with your role, your values, your influence? Okay. Dressing in a way that is authentic to who you are so that you're not necessarily copying anybody else, but maybe you're introducing certain things that make you who you are and make you that individual. And by the way, part of this is also growing in terms of your particular authentic style as your career grows or as your professional image grows. And as you become more successful, perhaps in the role that you have, or that you have expanded your network. So part of that, for example, I have a picture here of to me, what self-management is. So here is someone who started out their role doing one thing in terms of a career. And then as you go through those different iterations, where she finally ends up working in State House, you can see how her image has changed to fit her role. That to me is emotional intelligence, and particularly what I'm calling self-management. So we can also look at being able to obviously manage your gestures and posture. I think I alluded to that in terms of self-awareness, avoiding signs of agitation, controlling your posture, managing your um, facial expressions. You could have nervous tics. There's so many ways that people present themselves, particularly in a professional setting, that do a disservice in terms of their particular image and by extension, their influence. And particularly when things are heated. If you're able to control your cool, and you obviously can show that simply by how you control, how you use your body, then it just bodes well for you. There's a picture that I like to use in some of the sessions that I do. Now, if you were to look at those three individuals, all right, and this is a snapshot in time, and let's just, if I was to ask you, of those three individuals, and from left to right, we'll just number them 1, 2, 3. Which of these people do you think is best showing self-management just in terms of that particular picture, which looks at body language? Okay, so I have ones, I have ones, I have ones, I have ones, I have a 3, I have a 1. I'm waiting for somebody to choose to all of them. Right. Okay. And again, this is a snapshot in time, but think about an hour-long meeting or a half-hour interview or any iteration in terms of which you are professionally presenting yourself where the stakes are high. And how do you manage, again, how you hold your body to lead people down a particular path? And when it comes to voice, I mean, we're talking about, for example, speaking where you pause between certain words, particularly when things are stressful or when you're feeling anxious. And did you know that deeper voices actually reassure people more and communicate more confidence and control? These are things that you can use. Tap into managing whatever emotion it is that you're going through and use this to be able to present the image that you want. Now, you know, zebras have an interesting life. A zebra maybe wakes up in the morning, goes out, and starts eating the grass. Obviously, it's having its breakfast. 15 minutes into that, it is being chased by another predator that also wants its breakfast. Now, this particular zebra, the one that I'm showing you on this screen, if this zebra is able to escape, do you know that it returns to eating that grass and completely forgets that for the last 15 minutes you are running for your life? I mean, think about it. And in fact, if you were to put this in the context of, say, the zebra has 3 square meals a day. So in the morning, goes out, has breakfast, runs for its life, it escapes, comes back to eating the grass, and it doesn't even look over its shoulder. It simply resumes its meal. Let me put myself on screen so you can see my body language. Now, imagine this happens in the morning, happens at lunchtime. Again, goes out, starts eating, is chased for 15 minutes, comes back, resumes its meal, completely forgets. It's not even looking over its shoulder, says another lion coming or another predator. It simply is as if the event never happened. And then it does that, let's say, for the third time in the evening. Now, if you were a zebra, if you were the hooves of a zebra, how long before you decided this was not the life for me? I mean, think about it. If every time you had a meal and you had to run for your life, you would say to yourself, listen, what's the point of living? But do you know that zebras do not get ulcers? Yes, zebras don't get ulcers because they don't have um, any stress. What's the kind of stress I'm looking for? They don't have any accumulated stress. They simply do not hold on to the residue of having gone through a stressful situation or an anxious situation or feeling angry. They simply get rid of it. In fact, this is the ultimate resilience. So I think as human beings, we can learn something from the zebra. Yeah, we get ulcers because we hold on to that stress, or we are forecasting how things are going to be terrible tomorrow because it's going to rain, or we're ruminating on something that happened 2 weeks ago. And ultimately, this affects our behavior, affects our decisions, and affects our performance. So, what we need to do is regulate our emotions, okay? And by the way, regulating these emotions builds your sense of self mastery and confidence. I mean, and this is again something that I think all of us should work on. If you're able to say to yourself, you know what, I'm not going to worry about a certain event that's taking place tomorrow. I've prepared for it, I'm ready for it, I've done my due diligence. So worrying about it and ruminating on how things may or will go wrong simply doesn't help me. It simply builds you up, certainly as a professional, but as a human being, and gives you this balanced self image. And by the way, you can actually see yourself as remaining calm in the face of, when everybody's losing their heads. And this does wonders for your self esteem. This is such a powerful thing to be able to do, is to be able to have that sort of resilience and not to worry. Now, of course, there are levels and nuances to all of this, but start thinking about how you can manage the highs and the lows that go with the price of living or working for that instance. Now, all of these things that I've said, what do you think would be the impact if you were to start intentionally working and using this blueprint in terms of your image, in terms of the influence, using this blueprint of self awareness, awareness of others, and self management? What would be the impact? I have an acronym for this, and I call it the CASH impact or the CASH formula. So for me, the K is for the knowledge. And the impact is the knowledge that you know that your actions and presence shape not just your image, but they have an impact on those around you. And again, I use that word intention. I'm intentional with how I present myself to the world. And by the way, changing your attitude, retelling that story, just like in the last example that I used, instead of worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow or ruminating on what happened 2 weeks ago with my reptilian brain, instead, adopt a growth mindset and say things will be better. One of the key things I do every morning is to wake up and do my affirmations. And part of that is just telling myself the story that no matter what, you are going to be successful today. You are going to succeed. That you don't need to look at the worst case scenario. How else can you do this? Well, the S is for skills, and that is really to start working on these. And just like any skill, like the skill of a footballer being able to curl a ball around a wall, then this skill of all of those things that I've mentioned becomes second nature. And by the way, this will change not just your relationship to other people or to your target market, but your relationship with yourself, how you communicate and absolutely create a perception that might be different from the one that you have right now. And then, of course, once that skill is done routinely, it becomes a habit. And that it becomes second nature to continuously enhance this external image of who you are, as well as the internal image, which builds your image and your influence. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is it costing you? What is it costing you not to work on these things? What is it costing you? What do you think the implications are? What are you missing out on? What is it costing you? You know, just like a plane that is flying for 3,000 miles on a long haul flight to somewhere in Europe or Asia. If that plane is 1 degree off course, 1 degree off course, the radar has been set incorrectly. After every 60 miles, the plane is 1 mile off course. So if you do the math and you have a 3,000 mile flight and you are 1 degree off every 60 miles, or 1 mile off, I should say, literally that plane is going to turn around and land back where it left, JKIA. And that's just one way of looking at how it might not be much on one single occasion, but you compound that every day. You compound that by not being able to use um, uh, your image or your influence, I should say, or being able to use, we talked about how you can use dress and body language and work on yourself internally. Then after 2 years or 3 years, who knows where your career will be. And that's why that compounding effect also works in the opposite direction. It's little, you're just tilting those scales a little bit, but it is tilting those scales a little bit every day that you're actually able to then holistically work on yourself. So this is what we're trying to avoid, amongst the many things. Obviously, we don't want you to be unstable emotionally. Part of emotional intelligence is managing, perceiving those emotions, those different emotions you have. And it's not about killing those emotions. There's nothing wrong with feeling angry or feeling sad, but it's how you actually react and manage some of these difficult or strong emotions. And this talks to your trust, it talks to your credibility, confidence, and we can go on and on in terms of the compounding effect of not being able to work on some of these things. So, I had another clip, but I just realized the sound might not be clear. That's not a problem. I am going to ask if there was one thing that you could do. And in fact, let me rephrase that. What is it that you have either learned or you have relearned as a result of this conversation that we have heard today? Maybe the third thing I can add is that what can you commit to? What can you start doing? Or what can you stop doing? Or what can you continue doing? Just pop it in the chat. What is it that you have either learned, you have relearned, or maybe that you can start, stop, or continue doing? All right, let's see what the chart says. Okay, there's self-management for sure. Whoops. Compounding effect can take you forward or backward. Thank you, Wanjiru. The platinum rule. Thank you, Hosborn. Self-management, mercy. Emotional regulation, Linda. After that first chase is a wrap for me. Time to elevate. I hear you, Natalie. Okay. Cash. Thank you, Natalie. Self-management and emotional regulation. Thank you. What is the meaning of the H in cash? Pamela, H is habit. Success, work, habit. Habit. H is for habit. Dress well, Rita. Now, again, when we say dress well, perhaps what I'm trying to illustrate is dress appropriately. What is appropriate? Dressing well is dressing appropriately. This is not about suit and tie or, high heels and stockings. It's about what is appropriate to manage perhaps the emotions that you're going through or tap into your strengths and weaknesses. That is how you are then able to use that once you have been able to figure that out, and then you present yourself in that way. And it could be power dressing, or it could be being able to do the high-low in terms of casual dressing, or being able to mix fabrics, or whatever the case might be. Again, we didn't go into some of those details. So Purity says, dress up. I'm sure I don't care what I wear, provided I'm clean. This is just, I'm not quite sure what point you're making here. But hopefully, the point that I'm trying to make here is that you should. Dressing should not be an afterthought. Again, it should be something you wake up in the morning, you look at the audience that you're going to, or your target market, you examine some of these things that we've talked about. What are my mood? What is my emotion? How am I feeling? And all of these things that we've looked at. And then you present yourself, and that includes the grooming, in terms of how you can best handle that. The zebra theory. Thank you, Hosborn. Show up and be intentional. Thank you. Anne Kihuria, 55387. Thank you, Anne. Cash, how you dress communicates what you want your audience to perceive when they see. That is gold right there. Mercy, what does this mean for Gen Z dress code? Okay. When we say the Gen Z dress code, first of all, I don't necessarily believe there's a Gen Z dress code. I believe there's been a casualization of how people present themselves, and that may be attributed to a particular generation, like the Gen Zs. But in fact, if you would like to stand out as somebody who's, used to dressing casually, and you take these notes into point, then this might be the differentiating factor between you succeeding in a particular career versus somebody else, or getting the promotion versus somebody else. So again, you need to be a little bit more careful. I was going to use the word judicious in terms of how you dress. I realize we're casual, jeans, top, and I'm out of the door. That shouldn't necessarily be the case. And maybe take into account some of the things that I've talked about, and that might be something that tilts the scales in your favor. But I do hear you in terms of perhaps Gen Zs have a particular dress code. Intentionality to improve my interactions with myself. Thank you, Natalie. All right, wonderful, guys. So I'm just going to give my final slide over here. Where is it? And it's a quote. And it's a quote from a lady called Barbara Walters. And for those of you who may not know, Barbara Walters was a very famous journalist. She was a trailblazer as a female journalist. I mean, she, throughout her career, interviewed kings, queens, dictators. And we're talking about somebody who started doing this in the 1960s, all the way up till this century. She has now passed on, but I love this quote from her. It says, "It is not too melodramatic." Melodramatic. The very definition of that word is over the top, you know, melodramatic. But she's saying it is not melodramatic. It is not over the top like a Nigerian movie. To say that your destiny, that's another powerful word, destiny. In fact, I wish I had capitalized those words. Your destiny in life, your destiny is where you're going to end up. All of us are marching to an inevitable end. We're going to shake off this mortal coil, in the words of Shakespeare, and go 6 feet under. So, what do you want to be written on your gravestone? What do you want people to say about you when you're no longer here? To me, I talk about these things because I would like everybody to have a destiny that long supersedes them when they're no longer here. And people say, so and so was like this. And for me, it hangs on your image and by extension, the influence that you can give. And that starts with the one person that you're meeting tomorrow versus the 200 people that you'll be talking to next week, and whatever iteration that involves in terms of a career. So there you go. I would love to see all of you at the top. Rose, take it away.
Allow me to ask you a question, Derek, before you hand over to Ross, kindly.
Sure thing, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes, yes. My question is just how maybe somebody will ask how the Maslow hierarchy of needs can affect somebody's emotion.
How does the Maslow hierarchy of needs affect somebody's, what was that last word?
Intelligence, emotional
intelligence. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's been a while since I did sociology 101. Maslow hierarchy of needs, what do you have at the bottom there? You have basic needs, if I'm not mistaken.
And then at the bottom, we always have the self-actualization.
I thought self-actualization is at the top.
Yeah.
Self-actualization is at the top.
Psychological needs, that is the basic, the basic needs. That is food, shelter, water.
Yeah.
Then we have security needs, then love and belonging, then self-esteem.
Okay.
Then the last one is now the self-actualization.
Self-actualization. So your question is, how does Maslow's hierarchy of needs affect our emotional intelligence?
Yes.
Let me see if I can make the link. And it's going to be a stretch, but stay with me, Hosborn.
Yes.
When I'm communicating, my aim is to change your life. I have a call to action. Those last 3 slides that you saw are a call to action. I want you to start doing something that is going to be different tomorrow or even today. I'm going to take Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and instead of at the bottom having basic things like food and shelter, I am going to put there that people are driven by fear and greed. And what I mean by that is that if you can show your target market that their worst fears, and somebody's worst fears could be losing their job, losing their family, but if you can communicate to them and show them that if you're able to master your self-awareness, if you're able to master the awareness of others, if you're able to be authentic, if you're able to have self-management, if you're able to inspire people, and I'm using these emotional, if you're able to have resilience, then you are able to address that target market, that person's worst fear, which might be losing their job. Or when I talk about greed, because there's fear and greed could be they want, and I'm using greed in sort of a loose term, but they want to have a successful career. They would like to have a successful marriage. They would like to be healthy. All of that is linked to how you manage the feelings and the emotions that we all go through. All 34,000 in a 24-hour period. And if you're able to manage those, and I've just given you a snapshot of how you can manage them. If you're able to manage those in whatever setting you have. So if you imagine if you're able to manage that in the setting of being at home with your partner, then that possibly leads to a successful marriage. If you're able to manage that in the professional setting of working with your boss, or working with your team, or working with your peers, or if you're a boss, how your direct reports come to you, then that is the ingredient to a successful team. And so I am going to use that instead of my Maslow's hierarchy of needs is helping people overcome their greatest fear, which might be failure, or allowing them to achieve what they really want to achieve in this world. Husband has that
Yes.
struck a
Yeah,
chord
yeah.
with you
Thank you.
anyway.
Thank you. Thank
Imetuguza
you.
kidogo hapa. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sana. Sana.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank
All
you
right.
very much. Yes.
Thank you for the question.
We have Jane. Your hand is up.
Thank you, Derek, for the wonderful presentation. I am curious on the influence, especially as a leader. My question is now, we understand, or from my point of view, I understand that cholerics are natural leaders, but in a scenario like a plague melancholic, how do you build influence as a leader?
All right. I'm so sorry. That last part, I heard the cholerics are
Natural leaders.
natural leaders.
Yes. Now, for a plague melancholic, how do you build up on your influence as a leader, given that yes, you need to work on your leadership skills?
Okay. Just remind me again. What was that last one?
A plague melancholic.
A plague melancholic. Okay. What are their traits? If you can just quickly just tell me what are the traits of somebody who has that?
Okay. So one is somebody who I'd say maybe in terms of executing something, they are good in idea generation, but in execution, they are a bit slow. That's flag. And then male are, in most cases, they can get so emotional and all that. And so now, when it comes to creating influence, I understand that cholerics are natural leaders. That comes out naturally from them. But now, from, let's say, a phlegmatic person, how do you build influence as a leader?
Okay. All right. When you say, again, we have to be careful with the terminology. When we say get emotional, people say, for example, don't bring your emotions to work. What they're really trying to say is that manage those emotions, because those emotions are part of who we are. So whether you're phleg, melancholic, it is about being able to, and again, you could be through that personality type driven to making decisions based on instinct, or making decisions based on the immediate emotion that you feel. So some practical things that you can do. Again, if you're feeling something that is strong, if you're feeling something that is unhealthy, if you're feeling something that perhaps is taking you off the course, a practical thing might be maybe extricate yourself from that situation, rewrite or reframe the story that you keep telling yourself. And very often the case is that it is actually you are the person who has that particular problem. And when I say you have the particular problem, if, for example, somebody triggers you, so you have a team member, you have a boss, and then they talk to you in a particular way that makes you feel that quote unquote emotion, and then maybe you're the person who needs to go back and resolve certain issues that you have in terms of somebody using trigger words or even a tone of voice. In all of those cases, what I would say, Jane, is search within yourself. Anytime I feel a particular emotion, and particularly one of those unhealthy or strong emotions, rather than look at the person who told me or the event that put me there, I look at myself and say, why are you feeling like this? I begin interrogating myself. Why does the matatu trigger you when it cuts you off in traffic? What is going on there? The matatu triggers you because you feel a loss of control. Okay, why do you need to have control? And what can you substitute instead of feeling irritated or feeling angry or feel like you have been violated? Well, how about you maybe empathize with a matatu driver who might be doing that because they half their earnings are taken away by the owner of the matatu, or they are judged based on the number of passengers they bring. You understand what I'm trying to say? So it's really about reframing the story. Jane, any help?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Derek. What about influence?
Right. Now, influence is something that you can intentionally begin to do. So, as I've demonstrated here, how you present yourself to the outside world creates that perception that you are a person of influence. So maybe dressing in a particular way, standing, walking, sitting a particular way. I mean, these things might seem basic, but believe you me, they actually have a huge impact. Okay? How you speak, how you modulate your voice, how you use pitch, tone, pausing, vocal variation, all of these things. You can use them to begin shape the way you want people to perceive you.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Mr. Derek, for that wonderful presentation. And I believe we all live here fulfilled and taking our personal brand to another level. Thank you so much, our wonderful participants, for the engagements, a very active team. So we are very grateful. So I've shared Derek's contact on the chat. For those who wish to reach him directly, mostly he's very active on LinkedIn and all the social media handles that I've shared. Please reach him out, and I'm sure he's gonna get back to you. So I've also shared our from profiles. I've also shared our contacts. Please feel free to reach out to us. We will share with you the recordings. We will share with you Derek's contacts and also other programs that we are running at Profiles International. From my end, thank you so much, Mr. Derek. Thank you for creating time to empower us and also to give us this wonderful, wonderful session. It was amazing. From my end, I think I have nothing to say other than to tell you, Asante Sana.
Thank you, Rose. See you guys at the top.
Thank you very much. Have a very beautiful evening. I'm already feeling that is a very nice one.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Be blessed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Where were the contacts sent? On message or in email?
On chat. On the chat. On this chat here.
Me personally, I'm not able to see.
Okay.
I also haven't seen them. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry for that. Let me just get them. And then I will share again.
Probably use email because most people have left.
Yeah. We'll share them also on email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Liz.